All right, you ready? Today we're talking about 3 of the easiest ways to ruin your entire engagement season. If you've got a friend who's engaged, send this over to her. I take a deep dive into all 3 of these subjects in my course for engaged women. It's called Navigating Engagement. I'm gonna leave the link down below. Most brides I hear from, they say it was the best investment they ever made for their entire engagement. I walk a bride to be, through so many different things that you will encounter, you will have to navigate through. There are over 2 hours of videos, of worksheets. I talk about bachelorette parties, loving your fiance well. I talk about discernment. I talk about the wedding day. That honestly would have been the most important video for me. I give you 4 tools to put in your pocket to have the most peaceful wedding day possible, for you to have amazing perspective on your wedding day with advice and wisdom from many different women who have been brides and things they would have done differently that they wanted to share with you. So, navigating engagement for all you brides out there. All right, 3 easy ways to ruin your entire engagement so that you don't fall into these pitfalls and you have an amazing, peaceful engagement. Again, deep dive in the course. First way to ruin your entire engagement and make it a miserable, sad experience is to spend your entire engagement comparing it to other people's. And here's what I mean by this. It is such a miserable experience. Instead of being present to the engagement that you're in, to the man that you're engaged to be present to what's going on in your lives, how long your engagement is, what you can put together for your wedding, what your budget might be, to just be present to all that has been given to you rather than looking at what everybody else's timeline is, what they can do. You go to a wedding and you're like, oh my gosh, we can never have a wedding like this. I feel so miserable. I feel like, such garbage because our wedding will be nothing like this. If you spend your entire engagement with that perspective and with those goggles on of like, all right, what is everybody else doing? What does their engagement look like? What is this? Blah, blah, blah. What is that? You will be utterly miserable. And it has the power to ruin your engagement in the sense of your heart isn't present to the blessings and the beauty before you. Your heart isn't present to the simple gift, no matter what kind of wedding you have, no matter what kind of dress you might pick, the simple gift of the love that you share with your fiance. When you are consumed with looking at what everyone else is doing, it is impossible to be present to the engagement that you are in. So, when you completely eliminate comparison goggles from your engagement, it is so powerful. The second super easy way to ruin your entire engagement is to spend the whole entire thing focusing on what you cannot do versus what you can. And what do I mean by this? You might be seeing where I'm going with this. As a couple who was following Christ, a couple who did not live together, Daniel and I, a couple who did not have sex with one another before we got married, there were a lot of things that we couldn't do. We couldn't take trips together and stay in the same hotel room. We couldn't sleep in the same bed. We couldn't, X, Y, or Z. And there are many things that you can look at and say, I wish we could do these things already. I'm so frustrated that we can't do these things. I'm so frustrated that you have to go home and you can't stay the night at the house. We're in love and we want to have sex with one another, but we can't because we're trying to honor the Lord in this way. It's so easy to focus on all of those things and be frustrated by all of those things. Can those things be very difficult to navigate? Absolutely. Can those things be frustrating in their own ways? Absolutely. This is not to minimize the challenge that comes along with that. But if you spend so much time being frustrated and focusing on the can't, you will miss the perspective of what can we do? How can we grow together? How can we learn to love one another in this season that is particularly challenging in its own ways? I talk so much about that in Navigating Engagement, about how you're this engaged woman and everybody made it feel like, oh my gosh, it's like sunshine and roses and picking up cupcakes and so much happiness. And I thought to myself when I was doing it, I thought, nobody told me about this. This is really, really difficult in its own way. And that's why I want you, if you take the course, to feel like nobody told me about this, to think, Emily told me about this. Emily told me I was going to face something like this or face these things. But instead of the spirit of I can't or we can't, taking on that spirit of we can. We can learn to love one another in new ways. We can grow closer to one another, even though that physical aspect, sex, is not a part of our relationship. We can do so many different things to learn to love one another. We can have so much fun together. We can have such enjoyable times with one another, with our friends, with our family. We can make the most of this time, this season that we have with one another, whether it's 6 months, whether it's a year, whether it's a year and a half. It's like when you go back to Genesis and you look at Eve in the Garden of Eden, and God says, you can eat trees from all fruit. You can eat fruit from all these different trees. Like, there's so many good and beautiful things about life, but don't eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. There's this one, but there is so much abundance that can be found in that season. If you're focusing on this one tree rather than all of these trees, surely it could ruin your spirit and just bring a sense of just sorrow and sadness and more frustration than needs to be during this particularly beautiful, challenging, awesome, wonderful season. Okay, so I have to tell you, you might hear the tree trimmers in the background. It's so funny because this is just the way being a creator goes. I have mapped out making this video and being here and, having the boys be watched. And of course, the one day that I want to film is the day that the tree trimmers come. So I think they were just having a little break and now they're back on schedule. So if you hear a little tree trimming in the background, that's just the way it goes as a creator. The one day you're like, the tree trimmers pull up to trim our tree, and I'm like, great. This is always how it goes. The third way to easily ruin your engagement is to constantly make big problems out of little problems. So there's this book that the boys love. It's about these 2 dogs and they go on this trip together. It might ring a bell for you if you know the book. I forget what it's called. But in the end of the book, these 2 dogs have had the wrong size beds that they're sleeping in and they can't sleep. And the bird in the end says, well, that was easy to do. Big dogs need big beds and little dogs need little beds. Why make big problems out of little problems? And every time I read this, and I shared this on Instagram once before, every time I read this, I'm convicted again. Yeah. Why make big problems out of little problems, Emily? In my day-to-day life, in my motherhood, in my marriage, and whatever it is that I'm doing, why make big problems out of little problems? Don't make a mountain out of a molehill is a very common saying. It's so easy, and again, I cover this in navigating engagement, in managing your emotions and in managing the family dynamics and all of the new things that are coming at you. It's easy to be emotional, and it's easy to let things get blown way out of proportion, to make a huge problem. Whatever, the font is wrong on your invitations, or something falls through, someone doesn't show up for an appointment. Are there real big problems? Oh yeah. Women shared on that wedding day video. There are women who shared about all the problems that they encountered on their wedding day, and there were some really big ones. Wedding coordinators that didn't show up, 104 degrees, right? Everybody's sweating, the air conditioner breaks, all of these problems that are pretty significant on a wedding day. But if it's, these small problems, you ask yourself, and I share about this in the video called Where is Your Focus? Where is your focus, right? Looking at, is this really a big problem? Is the font being wrong on my invitation or whatever it is this a huge problem? Is this going to impede me from ultimately the end goal of my engagement, which is to marry my fiance? Or is this a little problem that I can manage and keep as a little problem and let it be what it is, a little problem that I can fix with the help of whoever that might be, whether that's my fiance or a parent or whoever, your friend, your maid of honor. If you spend your entire engagement blowing things out of proportion and letting these small things become massive issues, you will surely ruin your engagement season to become one that is fraught with stress and just overwhelm by things that are actually manageable when you have the eyes and the focus to see that they are. So if you are engaged, if you're engaged guy, you can send this to your fiance, or if you're engaged woman, a bride to be, I hope this brings a little bit of clarity to your engagement season and the perspective that you can have throughout this entire process. So much more in navigating engagement. Daniel is in a video on the wedding night. We talk all about the wedding night, physical intimacy, your sexual relationship. There is so much good stuff. So I don't want you to miss it. The link is down below. I hope that these things have been helpful for you, these pitfalls, so you can hop over these pitfalls, avoid these pitfalls as much as you can throughout the entire engagement season. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon. Bye.